I now want to call upon the Honourable Minister of Sport to introduce the budget vote. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, Deputy Minister of Sport and Recreation, Honorable Gertrude Steisen, members of the Portfolio Committee on Sport and Recreation, led by Honorable Julane, honorable members of Parliament, DG and officials of Sport and Recreation South Africa, chairpersons, presidents and CEOs of our sport and recreation entities, the broader sport and recreation fraternity. My family is also here, invited guests, our champions that are here today, and members of the media. It gives me a great pleasure to stand before you and introduce our budget vote, and our theme is I choose to be active. The advent of democracy ushered in an era of hope for a South Africa for all, a platform for the creation of a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous society. Led by our icon, Tata Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, together with other leaders of the liberation movement who fought tirelessly and determined to use the power of sport to change the long, painful, turbulent history of colonialism and apartheid, whose ugly head continues to haunt us. He had this to say, quote, "For one to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others," unquote. This leaves us with a deep-seated message that after we have viewed the impact of affected chains on the lives of others, that never again may we be instrumental in driving policies which do not enhance and respect the freedom of others, particularly in our sporting landscape. Presenting before you our 2018-19 sport and recreation budget, 24 years later under President Cyril Ramaphosa, who brings in a refreshed spirit of the new dawn. He declared this year as the centenary for Tata Nelson Mandela and Mama Albertina Sisulu. These are the two giants who used sport to provide dignity and hope in the face of apartheid-sponsored oppression, who used sport to undermine discrimination with resistance, who used sport to heal and help and unite society that the racial segregation of apartheid had brutally divided. It is a long walk that we must still all walk and take. I stand on the shoulders of such giants who symbolize unity, reconciliation, human rights. South Africans who fought for a united sport in South Africa. Some of them are departed, but departed as they are, they still live in our hearts because they led the transformation and unity in sport. We remember people like the former Minister of Sport, Comrade Steve Tshwete, another former Minister of Sport, Minister Makengesi Stofile, and many others. These were pioneers for a united sport in South Africa. And included in the list, and one of the remaining ones of those pioneers is Sam Ramsamy, who is still here and continues to serve South African sport and serves our country as a member of the IOC and a board member of SASCO. The work they do in the country and in international bodies must continue to unite the country and the world. It must exert influence needed that the country and the world can use sport as a tool to promote human rights, equity, and inclusiveness, and ensure that the world never regresses. Taking forward on the legacy left by those before me, including my immediate predecessors, to date, the National Department of Sport and Recreation, over 4 consecutive years, has been receiving a clean audit. The 5th transformation report, the EPG report, has just been released, and one stepping stone is the fact that there's a green light that indicates the commitment by federations because they set targets for themselves. And we also, as you can see how I am wearing today, our netball Brutal Fruit Premier League has grown in leaps and bounds. The inaugural National Volleyball League, which just completed in March 2018, where the Western Cranes became the champions. I suppose they are here at the gallery with their cup. And our Indigenous Games Festival has been strengthened as a major sport and cultural event that celebrates our heritage. We have a small budget. Our total budget is about $1 billion, and it has only gone up by about 24.1 million from the previous year's allocation, which is about 2.19% growth. The allocation programs, where program 2 stands at 704 million, having gone up by 7.3 million from the previous year's allocation, it constitutes a 1.05% growth. This allocation is to support the provision of mass participation opportunities in sport and recreation. For program 3, it has grown by about 10.53%, which is an allocation of 79.8 million, which is allocated to support the development of elite sport, elite athletes. Program 4, which stands at 158.1 million, is used to develop and support an integrated support system to enhance the delivery of sport. And the next program, which is an allocation to manage the provision of sport and recreation facilities, stands only at about 13.8 million. Recreation for us is as important as sport. Starting from early childhood development, our concern has been with the current state of obesity and overweight children who are the future adults of this world, who are also invaluable target market within the scope of our work. The prevalence of non-communicable diseases like stroke, cancer, diabetes, asthma, depression, heart diseases are a cause for concern because government and corporates are adversely affected. These require a change of heart and strategies to ensure that we also have physically active lifestyles. 587 million of our allocation is allocated to the provision of mass participation opportunities and recreation under the banner of our Active Nation program. The Deputy Minister will elaborate on the various programs under mass participation. And this is 54% of our entire budget, which is channeled towards development. With this small budget that we have as sport and recreation, we cannot do much if we work alone. Serious partnerships are critical We need to partner with the private sector. We need to integrate and align programs in order to enhance opportunities in a coordinated manner. Successful sporting countries have proven that focused support is much better than to support every code with limited resources that government has. The department, in consultation with SASCO, will continue to prioritize federations to ensure that they are capacitated to deliver their programs and to deliver the sector's vision of an active and winning nation. We have had a conversation with the President's Council, and we have tasked them to do an in-depth assessment of their respective codes and see whether they represent the codes that would afford opportunity for more participation by South Africans. We've tasked them to assess the level of activity in each province and allow dominant and existing codes to be prioritized in provinces so as to have focus on development, infrastructure, and enhance on the limited resources, but some of them it's because they are scattered and are operating in silos. We also have tasked them to develop a funding model proposal so that we can support each other when we also get to engage private sector to partner with us and also have some standardization of procedures. Federations are also urged to avoid court cases as these monies they spend on these compromise the implementation of key deliverables. They are also further tasked to look into their governance issues, which are key in order to present credible organizations, and therefore they have been asked to resolve their leadership in fightings. The transformation of sport shows renewed sense of commitment, as I indicated earlier on, and we are saying to federations, we want to hear their voices, and they have to participate in the EPG implementation plan and be vocal on matters that are contrary to the agenda of transformation of the country. Because, for example, as we are presenting this budget, we are facing a court case by Solidarity that claims that what we are doing is unfair to those who have held privilege since the dawn of colonialism and apartheid. I have since directed that we defend this case with all the might the state can have. It may take a huge chunk of our budget, but it is so critical and it is of national importance in the sense that it can potentially reverse the gains of democracy for the underprivileged majority across the board. The other matter is the matter of the International Athletics Association Federation, IAAF. As Ministry of Sport and the Department of Sport and Recreation, we have engaged SASCOC and Athletics South Africa on the ongoing matter relating to the new eligibility regulations for female classification for events from 400 meters and 1,500 meters of International Athletics Federation. We have agreed that SASCOC's Medical Commission should meet to evaluate the evidence that IAAF has relied upon. That ASA should assemble a legal team to act based on the advice of experts to lodge an appeal with IAAF. And should this not be heeded, they must proceed with the matter at the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Switzerland. We call on all South Africans to support and give space to our caster, and we thank Professor Steve Cornelius for being a true South African by rejecting the unjust, discriminatory, sexist, and homophobic regulations designed to disadvantage caster and any other upcoming African-built athletes. We will keep track on the developments and utilize all available avenues, working in consultation with all relevant stakeholders and ensure a favorable outcome for all affected athletes. Women in sport is still minimal, it lacks support from relevant codes, and often has no sponsors. Netball, yes, it does have a sponsor, but it is in its final year. Banyana Banyana does not have an equal platform like Bafana Bafana, and they're doing so well. Our girls in general, throughout and across the sports fraternity, also need protection, and we also need protection of our athletes. We want to make sure that each and every code is able to give us what it is doing towards this cause. And we also want federations to mobilize the individuals who have been participating to make South Africa active by training or coaching young people without being members of such federations or associations. Those private sector initiatives are appreciated, but we want them to be incorporated and be part of overall activities. So federations must not practice gatekeeping. Our key focus areas for 2018-19 start with an excitement around school sport, which is a foundation for sport development. We have prioritized this. It's going to be our flagship because soon, before the end of by the end of this month, we would have signed formally our memorandum of agreement with the department, and we looking at this to effectively look into the sustainability of our interventions, and it is going to present experiences into the school day and will make sport accessible to all children who attend school, regardless of their physical ability, gender, socioeconomic background. And our participation in school sport promotes healthy lifestyle and has a potential to inevitably reduce the health bill. Learners in sport are learners away from jail and drugs. Therefore, in this regard, I am excited because already, even before the signing, we are looking into implementation that is going to take us forward to implement our actions. And this is very important for us, for our transformation and social cohesion, and we are looking at schools and communities working together so that we can unite and share in the glory that sport people achieve. School sport generally is recognized as the bedrock of talent identification. And together with all our sporting bodies, we want to develop a focused approach and nodes within which we're going to operate, and therefore each and every one of us would understand their role in moving forward.
Honourable Minister, you have 2 minutes left.
The next is looking into sport development in general. Our success in this area is improving, and we congratulate our Team South Africa, our athletes who made us so proud in the Gold Coast and continuously have been excelling, because this is what we are talking to when we talk a winning nation. We're looking forward to Tokyo, whilst we know our athletes who have broken world records, they have really made us proud. In the last 2 days also, we're excited to hear of Eki Butler, who became the first South African boxer to hold 3 major world crowns simultaneously. These are our role models. And our communities are not left behind. We are working with traditional leadership, and we have successful programs that have been taking place, and we continue to support our federations and give them intensive support. We will move on to ensure that our programs are successful, our rural sport reaches to our communities, and ensure ultimately, Chair, that we are working together and enforcing our relationships at all levels as government, and also make sure that we work and maximize the use of our municipal infrastructure grant to bring the much needed infrastructure into the rural areas and small municipalities like Swellendam that we handed over infrastructure yesterday. We hope this budget, working together with the private sector, we are going to make sure that 2018 will be different, and we will reach out more to communities when we work together. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next speaker is the Honorable Dlulane.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister, Honorable Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members of Parliament, the guests, and also the department led by our DG. I'm standing here to say that as a committee, ANC, we support this budget vote. Honorable Chairperson, afford me the opportunity to welcome our new minister, Minister Thokozile Xhasa. This is the first time that this department has a female minister. She leads this department at a very challenging time when you are confronted with issues of transformation in sport. We urge that she is treated with due respect that she deserves and not to be undermined in any manner. We note how the ministry was treated at recent Nelson Mandela centenary match between Mamelodi Sundowns and FS Barcelona, where the ministry was not part of the entourage welcoming the European team. We say that not in our name shall ever happen again. We have only one Minister of Sport and Recreation. We also saddened by the incident that happened during a Super Sport television broadcast involving Mr. Edwin Willems, Mr. Nas Porter, and Mr. Nick Mallet, and we vehemently condemn racism in sport in all its manifestations. We support the minister's call for investigation on what happened. Pending the finalization of the investigation. Honorable members, in commemoration of the life of servitude and sacrifice that Mama Nomzamo Zanyiwe Winifred Madikizela Mandela played in the lives of many in our country, no one will ever forgotten the moment of the 18th, despite facing adversity, when Mokgadi Caster Semenya stepped up to the podium and straightened back, clenched, and raised her fist in commemoration of Mama Madikizela Mandela to collect her gold medal, which she won in the 800 meters race at the Gold Coast, Australia. It had come to be known that Caster and Mama Winnie were close and had advised Caster at all times to be herself, to love herself, and to not listen to the noise. Mama Winnie is epitome of her Stumamina campaign. Her life was dedicated to the people, and we recommit to multiple in our lifetime and be like Mama Winnie, and we boldly say we remain available. Metina. The committee vehemently speaks out against the continuity victimization of our own Mokgadi Caster Semenya. We are witness the injustice around Caster Semenya As we widely reported, the IAF has issued a new eligibility regulation for female classification, greatly impact South African caster. The question is, why are they doing that? Has gender verification made women's athletes into a sordid masquerade when IAF attempt to do this on caster in the past? The late Sport and Recreation Minister, Makengesi Stofile, perceived it as a trigger towards Third World War. Will be crystal ball gazers around caster. We are watching every move around here. It is indeed a pleasure and honor for me to address you on the occasion of the Sport and Recreation budget vote, to fittingly and appropriately celebrate the centenary year of our founding father, President Nelson Mandela. We must recommit to fight alongside all those who are yearning for their freedom, justice, and prosperity. This is also the year where we equally celebrate Mama Albertina Sisulu under the theme, A Woman of Fortitude. She was undoubtedly a woman of courage and resilience who advanced women's rights throughout her adult life. The budget report, chairperson of Vote of Sport and Recreation South Africa, is a need of the work that, as the committee has been mandated with our oversight, both the financial and non-financial performance of the department and the entities as per the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. This budget vote is the culmination of the work that has been continuing and will continue to ensure that Vote 40 transforms the delivery of sport and recreation by ensuring that there is equitable access, development, and excellence at all levels of participation, thereby improving social cohesion, nation building, and quality of life for all South Africans, as well as also contribute not only to the sustainable economic development, but entrench social integration and cohesion. We all know, Chairperson, that this year's budget overview, which is always guided by the ANC policy priorities, outline a series of measures to rebuild economic confidence and return the public finances to a suitable path. The proposal built government's renewed committed to effective policy implementation, good governance, and inclusive development. In partnership with the business and labor, the ANC-led government intends to set South Africa on a new path of growth, development, and transformation. Honorable the Chairperson, we do have challenges, and as a committee we have noted one of the major challenges that has hampered the committee has been the lack and absence of assistance of a committee research and content advisor. We urgently request that a researcher and a content advisor assistant is provided to the committee as the tools required to assist the committee with and in their preparation to fulfill their mandate. Despite the lack of support staff to assist us in our work, I must commend the committee on the fruitful and robust deliberations on the annual performance plan and the strategic plan of the department. On work done on the safety and the recreation events, as well called SASRIA. Honorable members, the minister is in the process of making proposals on the amendments of Safety and Recreation Events Act. We'd like to take time to appreciate the work done by the department on this act, and we reiterate that we support it. On the violence during matches, the violence that occurred in that PSL game must be last tragedy in our sport fraternity. Never again should we witness such a negative image in our popular game. such a tragedy lies at the center of what I'm talking about when I raise the issue of accountability and poor management systems. As politicians, we have provided all necessary legislative instruments to ensure we have provided, as politicians, we have provided all necessary legislative instruments to ensure that no blood is lost again, especially moving from the Ellis Park incident, post the unfortunate incidents of the violence, various stakeholders and entities were called to a joint committee meeting of Police and Sport Recreation of South Africa to find a lasting solution to violence at stadiums across the country. We thank the cooperation and solution-based approach of these stakeholders and entities. We call upon the department to implement our proposed decision to particular fill the gaps on the discussion of that day. Having noted all of this, we also want to thank the fans on the conduct they demonstrated at the recent Nelson Mandela centenary match between Mamelodi Sundowns and the FC Barcelona. We have achievements. We have noted as the committee, briefly in school sport, since 2016, championships have been organized over 3 seasons. These have been divided as follows: autumn, winter, and summer. Since 2017, in each seasonal championships started implementing the 3-year cycle and have implemented the long-term participant development model. This model emanates from the South African coach framework, which was adopted by all federations with SASCOC. Through this model, the competitive level of championship, in order to attract the best of talent from the school, through the school sports program annual, more than 2,500 schools are provided with sports equipment and attire. We know that it's not enough. Data input quality and reliability support the commitment to the transformation process have shown cricket, rugby, netball, tennis, soccer, hockey, and rowing to be at the top of the class. Many of these federations have made additional resources available to ensure consistent improvement in data collection and submission processes. More than half of federations audited have elected black presidents into position, whereas almost 70% have reported the elections of boards that are more than 50% black. Women representation at board level has also shown to be improving, in that 7 out of the 19 federations have reported female representation and board level larger than prescribed by the transformation, but there are those who still have umziwe insizwa. The committee observation. The committee, in its concluding remarks at the APP and strategic plan of the department, observed the following: some provinces and municipalities are still unable to spend allocated funds from municipal infrastructure, MIG. Community sport and club development is an urgent requirement. No delivery by local government with regard to building facilities with municipal infrastructure grant that is allocated for the purpose of building sport and recreation facilities. The committee is concerned about the number of people actively participating in organized sport and active recreation events and the delay in reporting by the provinces. The committee recommendations is that to ensure that the department ultimately meets the vision of outcome 14 of continuing to fulfill its mandate of nation building and social cohesion. And the committee recommended the following: the committee must continue its interaction with SALGA and the National Council of Provinces to assist ensuring that the MIG is fully utilized ensure that provinces have a capacity to spend allocated funds so as to avoid funds returning to the national treasury. The committee emphasized the need for provincial departments to budget for sport and recreation for their equitable share budget allocated by the provincial treasurers. We do understand that it's only about 2 provinces that they are doing that. The committee notes that they must develop a framework of how provinces use the Vision Revenue Act, UDORA, funds in line with the priorities of the National Sport and Recreation Plan as approved by National Treasurer, strengthening monitoring system of the use of DORA funds by provinces, ensure that SASRIA has clear performance indicators in line with mandate of the sub-programs within each program, enforce the compliance of federations towards transformation and consider rewarding federations that have achieved and exceeded the set targets for transformation, and meeting targets have been, but we are not compromising on that. We must not also sometimes reward you, must just congratulate you, because you're supposed to do, like it or not. You also note that the government is beginning to address the problems that have eroded domestic confidence, such as corruption and poor governance. Yes, there are problems of poor governance in some of our sporting codes. They know themselves. Others are still lagging behind of transformation and on how they manage their finances, something which be perceived as a clear political defiance as this committee. As we are approaching our end of political office, I want to remind all federations present today that are here today that we are not pleased on the following: school sport implementation, rural sport development, effective utilization of both MIC and USDG, poor financial and information management systems, transformation of sport in South Africa, lack of accountability. Honorable members, there were expected outputs to be articulated just before we leave our political office, which stemmed from the expected outcomes of the service level agreements that were planned to achieve responsive accountability, effective and efficient in our department. The delivery agreement contained the following outputs, defined as target identification through school sport, community develop mass participation, improve performance of athletes through scientific support programs, utilize high performance as repository conducive towards excellence, develop sport academies, entrench physical education, empower sport and recreation federation, unite the country, remain international and globally competitive, implement a differentiated approach towards sports and recreation facilities at municipalities through MIC and USDG to beef up sports infrastructure, and assist sport councils financially as well as through proper planning and support. In the context of policy priorities, it is significant to note that even over the past 2 years, there was a realization, a commitment to allocate more resources to long-term infrastructure investment, as we highlighted by the former Minister of Finance in the budget. Our desire to practically see this is to ensure that we leave a credible legacy and we strive towards cohesion and national building through our actions and oversight, especially entrenching civil peace. Nobody in this room will contest the power of sport. It is for that reason that as I conclude, it's important that we remind each other that as a country, we have fought a brave struggle. We have won a bittersweet freedom, and we are slowly building a nation. Our nation is a work in progress. And like the many nations that make up this world of ours, there comes a time when the people reach a crossroad and have had to make a difficult choices. Some have made wise choices, and they continue to reap the benefits of that wise choices, while others have made poor choices that have led to death and destruction. As I'm going to sit down, let me recognize the former member, a veteran of this committee, former Honorable Moss. We welcome you back in this house. To all of our
Honourable
visitors,
Member, your time is now expired.
thank you that you are here. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Mhlongo.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would like to acknowledge all our guests, different federation leadership which are here, and acknowledge the Minister and the members of the committee. Chairperson, the late former President Nelson Mandela stated that, open quotes, "Sport has power to change the world. It has power to inspire, the power to unite, and the power to make sure that we break down the racial walls. Sport is the game of lovers," close quote. Chairperson, it is clear that we need total change that will deliver the dream to all South Africans. Sport has power to change South Africa. We must focus on making sports events safe, accessible, and available to everybody. The estimated budget is not enough. Ngale sabelo mali, ngeke sifeze izinto zokuthi umphakathi usebenzise sports facility. With this current budget, the current ANC government is failing to deliver. Chairperson, we cannot realize sport infrastructure in our poor community. We cannot build sports facility with this budget. We cannot change special planning of apartheid. In 24 years into democracy, our poor community still cannot access proper sports facility. It leaves one with this question: what has the ANC government actually done? Nenzeni to ensure that our sports facility caters for all disabled people? Chairperson, the answer to this question, it is absolutely clear that anenzanga lutho, dololo, anenzanga lutho. Chairperson, this budget is not addressing the imbalances of the past. The ANC government, it's not taking sports seriously. It is not their priority. The DA government will make sure that it prioritizes sports to take care and to make sure that development takes place. Chairperson, the ANC prioritized on the following: 2.9 million for ministers' traveling cost, Nenzagalan. Chairperson, 1.5 billion for VIP protection for ministers. This budget must be utilized to develop sports, especially school sports. Chairperson, this budget is not even addressing motorsports. We have motorsports, we are not recognizing it. For an example, we have motorsports, which is happening only at Kayalami, but it's not happening in Makas.
Order.
ANC government, it's doing nothing. They've bring our beloved country in its knees. Chairperson, this government is not addressing the backlogs of infrastructure. This government cannot come up with a mechanism to address sporting issues. I visited one of the complexes in Soweto as I was doing my oversight visit. I went to Pimville in Johannesburg, where our government is leading the municipality. Chairperson, that complex caters for all sporting code. We have 8 different sporting codes which the city-led government has produced at Kliptown, next to Nike Stadium. We'd like to acknowledge the work done by Mayor Mashaba in this regard. The DA-led city has ensured that our
Order,
people
honourable members.
gets
Order.
delivery. Chairperson, the DA government will ensure that investment in sports recreation facility on local, provincial level, that all our communities will be able to benefit in this. One South Africa for all, one South Africa for all. Our people deserve better. If Johannesburg works, South Africa will work. Chairperson, the minister has failed to deal with PSL issue. The minister has failed to deal with inquiry. She has dropped the ball. She failed to take charge of national importance. This PSL issue, minister, it's so important that you must make sure that you reopen the inquiry. You fail to make sure that this inquiry iyaqhubeka. For an example, Chairperson, the minister has
Order,
failed.
honorable members.
What you
Order.
do on your left, you must do it on your right. You cannot just have one inquiry for SASCOC, but you close PSL inquiry. It is uncalled for. We strongly condemn what happened at Moses Mabhida Stadium. Minister, the intervention of the minister is needed as urgently because we want to stop this violence in Zagala Stadium zethu. Chairperson, the minister was ill-informed to drop that inquiry. I still state you were ill-informed to drop that inquiry. The parliament must make sure that it fulfills its role in supporting all sporting code, but will make sure that they account to our committee. Chairperson, the DA will bring total change come 2029. Chairperson, South Africa will make sure that we work together with making our sports successful. Chairperson, who's fooling who?
Order, honorable members. Order. Order, honorable members.
Chairperson, who's fooling you? I wanted to find out from the minister. The minister is not supporting Morocco bid, but SAFA support Morocco bid. Kwenzakalani? The minister is not supporting the bid for Morocco 2026. SAFA is supporting it. Kwenzakalani? Who's fooling who, minister? Can you please respond on that? We're still waiting for the SASCOC report. We've used plus minus 4 million on this inquiry, but to date we don't have
Order,
the
honorable
report.
members. Order.
Thank you, Chairperson. Imoto mayihamba izinja ziyakhonkotha. That's why nikhonkotha. Chairperson, what I want to acknowledge, ukuthi, the minister must make sure that the inquiry iyaqhubeka. We need to make sure that our resources are utilized, especially in development of sports emakhaya. Chairperson, I want to make an example. We need an inquiry regarding
Order,
the
honorable
National
member.
Lottery Fund. The minister must investigate the fronting of NGOs that are using our funding gabi. For an example, minister, the NGO will request 10 million, but they'll give Federation 2 million, which is it's uncalled for. Kunomkhonyo vilapo. Minister, please, that must be investigated. Chairperson wanted to make sure ukuthi all this in sports
Honorable
facility.
member, your time is now expired. Thank you. The next speaker, order, is the Honorable Paulson. And just before the Honorable member starts with his speech, we want to recognize all the guests in the gallery. Welcome to the sitting. But we kindly request you not to take any photographs from the public gallery. It's not allowed in Parliament. Thank you. You may continue, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning, especially the President of the South African Rugby Union and the President of the Western Province Rugby Union and the members of his board that are present here today, and also Mr. Williams, wonderful soccer player. I wish you were in that studio on Saturday. The job wasn't finished off properly. And Minister, I'd like to start off by commending you for your stance on Morocco. You can never support a colonizer. I don't see why the DA is surprised that you won't support a colonizer in its bid for the Soccer World Cup. And you must also speak to, speak to SAFA to ensure that they don't support Morocco's bid to host the World Cup. But Minister, let's speak about Saturday. So all South Africans watching rugby were given a perfect example
Point of order, Chair.
how your department has failed. Those watching would have
Point of
seen
order,
Ashwin Willemse, who represented South African rugby
Point
at the
of order,
highest
Chair.
level,
Okay.
and who has
What's the-
been a
what's the-
TV analyst for many years, finally stand up to the
Point of order,
bullying and
Chairperson. I'm allowed
patronizing
to raise a point of
attitude
order.
Yes, thank you very much. Just
Can I
please
ask a
give us
member a
few
question?
seconds. But what is the
Can
point
I
of
ask a
order?
member a question?
No, no.
I don't have time,
member,
Chairperson. Sit down.
member.
Shut up and sit down.
What's the point of order?
Finally stand up to the bullying and patronizing attitude and continued white arrogance which we see in many of our sporting codes. This is an arrogance born from the fact that today, 24 years after our first democratic elections, whites continue to dominate South African rugby and other sporting codes at the playing level, but more particularly at coaching, management, and administration level. The white boys club that continues to exist in sports like rugby is a continuation of the segregated apartheid sporting codes that maintain white dominance of sport at the professional level. A segregation that the same two presenters who were subtly patronizing Mr. Willemse sanctioned and supported by participating in apartheid national rugby side, like those who supported a South African government during the years of apartheid, the very same type of people that played rugby during apartheid. How many of them would have actually played for the Springboks if generation upon generation of black, colored, and Indian South Africans had been given an opportunity to play? We must not forget that those who played sport at the national level during apartheid were the biggest quota players this country has ever seen, as quota back then was 100% white. But this arrogance we talk of would have been a thing of the past if this department has done what it was meant to do. And while we used to white racism and the arrogance it breeds, the failures of our government to do anything to transform sports in our country are even harder to accept. The lack of will and backbone by the ANC to transform management, administrators, and rugby as a whole shows the lack of commitment to transformation this government has. Although we know that the ANC is just scared of white people. The EFF is not scared of white people. We fear Fokol, not even white people. This lack of commitment is also reflected in our little attention and our few resources the government has given to developing young black sports talent.
Just a minute. I think that we should really desist from using language that is unparliamentary. So I'm going to ask you, Honourable Member, to withdraw the word "focal."
Okay.
Please do that.
But not the whole fear focal.
Focal.
Okay,
Just remove the word focal.
Okay.
Not the phrase, the word focal.
But they are connected.
The word.
Okay, withdraw.
Focal.
All
Thank you very
private
much.
schools and former Model C schools, which many call white schools, have top quality sports facilities. They have well-maintained fields, pools, equipment, and qualified coaches. Go to our schools in the townships and the rural areas, and all you will see is a dusty piece of land which serves as a field. Yes. Waarheid. White people. If you want to transform sport in this country, you must tackle the racist culture at the top. But at the grassroots level, you must ensure that all children, regardless of race, have access to quality sporting facilities and equipment. There are examples of this throughout recent history, from Cuba to China. But our government is useless, incompetent, and scared of white power and white people, and therefore is unwilling to take the necessary steps to transform sports in this country. Minister, you said 2018 will be different. How will it be different from the elitist, classist, and racist infrastructure
Time has expired.
that has brought about issues like appeared in that
Time has
studio on
expired.
Saturday?
Honourable
Minister,
Member.
when you deal with sport, as with everything
time
else,
has
you must
expired.
fear nothing. You must not fear white people.
Time has expired.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. So, Honourable Stoller, please proceed.
Honorable Chairperson, ngibingelela ngokukhethekileyo uMinister waKwaZulu-Natal uMasithole. Sport and recreation is essential ingredient for the health, well-being and balanced lifestyle for all South Africans. Yet it remains inaccessible to the large majority of South Africans.
Just a minute. Can I make a plea to members? Please stop having dialogue and conversing in ways that really disturb the speaker on the floor. Please proceed, member.
Thank you, Chair. The sad fact is that this budget is still far too inadequate to address proper national transformations and ingredients in sport. Alukho lolu hlahlomali. Sport development through the Active Nation program is simply not achieving its goals. And one of the principal other reasons for this is the continual failure by the province to spend on the allocation of funds for sport and recreations. We have school sport programs that fall under this budget, but are without sport equipment, sport fields, and trainers. We have sport clubs, such as in the sport of boxing, that promote development of sport from youth novice through the professional boxes. These clubs receive no assistance, despite the important role they play in sport development. Chairperson, additionally, both this department and the Department of Basic Education have not yet implemented their memorandum of understanding. For the Wednesday during the school terms to be sports days, why is there such delays, Honorable Chairperson? Rural and township schools in South Africa still awaiting sport code implementation. This is a much of a failure of national government, as it is a failure of provincial and local government. In terms of transfers and subsidies in sport of national sport bodies, we are still seeing a general trend of non-transformation being followed. Although in part of government is to blame, as grassroots level sports development is still in many parts of the country non-existent. Sport federations should be voluntarily complying, as they all subscribed to the country's constitutional and democratic values, yet the department continues to have to use a form of command and a coalition to ensure compliance. No compliance in an unreasonable manner has been held by courts to constitute unlawfulness, and legal action by the department should be pursued in this instance against such sport bodies and federations. Security for sport fans at our stadium has become a real concern. With many instances of violence and injury occur with fans, whilst violence in any way can never be condoned. The outbreak of violence at Moses Mabhida Stadium also point to a lack of security and crowd control expertise and measures by stadium management, who must also bear responsibility in this instance. Prevention is also better than reactive measures, and in this regard, audits should be conducted at all major public sports grounds to ensure that effective crowd management and control processes are in place. In the interest of accelerating transformations and access to sport for all South Africans, the IP will support this budget. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is from the NFP, Honorable Kubisa.
Chairperson, thank you very much, honorable members, minister, deputy ministers present, our guest in the gallery. Chairperson, we want to support this budget because we believe that sports, it's very crucial for the upbringing of our children. But at the same time, Chairperson, we want to condemn what happened on Saturday on Supersport, and we also want to sympathize with Mr. Willems on what happened to him. And we also thank the South Africans for coming up to condemn such. We're also aware that the minister came out to also condemn what happened. And we wish this does not happen in our sport. And we know that sport should be propagating unity, integration, and cohesion in our country. That's why, therefore, we say it is comforting to see that the lovers of sports and most South Africans generally have come out to condemn what happened on Saturday. And the purpose of this vote, Chairperson, is to transform the delivery of sport and recreation by ensuring equitable access, development, and excellence at all levels of participation, thereby improving social cohesion, nation building, and quality of life for all South Africans. And of course, this vote should also contribute to economic development. Honorable Minister, we are worried about the slow pace of transformation in certain sports codes like rugby, cricket, tennis, and other sports codes. Sports South Africa must also ensure transformation in management. Very few women are in management positions in sports. We need to see more young people, especially women, getting in management positions. The department must ensure that there are more and more well-equipped and better resourced sports academies and centers of excellence and development, especially in townships and rural areas. It is known, Chairperson, that most of the best players came from rural areas, they came from townships. I remember those days when legends like Jomo Sono would travel to places like Umnambiti and also Newcastle, where they were scouting for sports, and sportsmen and sportswomen. And eventually we have the best soccerists in the country. I think we need to return those glory days of 1996, and I'm able to see that there is Mark Williams there, and we had the best soccerites who were fond of our country, who were real compatriots, loving our country, playing out to ensure that our country was put on the map. We want to see that. And it will not happen, Chairperson, if we don't have equipment, especially centers of excellence in rural areas, sports academies that are well equipped, and ensure that municipalities use the MIC funding accordingly. And we've noticed that when our kids are involved in sports, they are safe from indulging in drugs and other senseless activities. They live the focused life, a life full of dreams and visions. And there are matters of concern, of course, like infighting in federations and issues of fraud and corruption that we're hearing of. These matters must really be eroded from sports, Minister, because they tarnish the good name of sports. And what is happening again with SAFA and PSL, whereby we see leaders coming out in public and exchanging words that are not acceptable, that is not acceptable because it tarnishes the image of our sports. We need to condemn those of us, the leaders in sports, who are making sure that their clubs work hard to put sports on the map of our country. And we must also congratulate Patrice for what he did for bringing in FC Barcelona, in celebrating the legacy of Madiba. And we think such activities will escalate sports. Chairperson, we want to support this and say BSA and sites must do its work, put its house in order. Thank you very much, Chairperson. We support it.
Honorable Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson, Minister of Sport and Recreation, honorable members. The National Development Plan envisions a society where South Africans will be more conscious of our things that we have in common rather than the differences we have. Their lived experiences will progressively undermine and cut across the divisions of race, of gender, of disability, space, and class. The sharing of common space will be enabled through improving public spaces and services and to elevate sport at both community and our school levels. As a Sport and Recreation Department, our focus more than anything is to see our country physically active. It is when physical activity becomes second nature to us that we will live healthy lives and hopefully unearth the new talent which will assist in our transformation agenda. The 2018 Sport and Recreation Budget vote is delivered at a time when the World Health Organization released alarming statistics regarding the growing inactivity of humankind all over the globe, including our country, South Africa. Rapidly rising rates of chronic disease, escalating healthcare costs, the shorter lifespans are all linked to declining levels of physical inactivity. Estimates of the World Health Organization, in fact, is that 35 million people are dying annually of chronic diseases such as high blood pressure, diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular diseases, and cancers that cannot be ignored. Now I have in the gallery here my beautiful wife, Mirinda, who was yesterday diagnosed after she had a mastectomy, double mastectomy. She's teen of cancer in remission. And I want to tell you now, the day I married you, I love you more now. Thanks for being here. In the face of these challenges, caused by inactivity, we call on everyone to choose to be active. We urge South Africans to join the Active Nation movement and support the I Choose to Be Active campaign that our minister has alluded to. As a country, we have to address this growing phenomenon of inactivity as economic costs are unaffordable and the human costs are unforgivable. This cannot be allowed to continue unabated on our watch. As a ministry and department, we are compelled to do everything possible to fulfill our vision of an active nation. This, not only for the health reasons, but also to maximize the impact of sport on economic growth, on peacekeeping and peace building, on social cohesion and nation building. We have to ensure dignity, equality, and mutual respect for all women and men. Outcome 14 of government's program of action acknowledges that despite progress since 1994, the South African society remains divided. As a delivery partner to Outcome 14, our department will continue to offer opportunities for communities to participate in sport and recreation events that unite us as a nation and foster social cohesion. In fact, sport is one of the most important cohesive factors in uniting the entire nation. That was a lesson we've learned from the father of our rainbow nation, Tata Nelson Mandela. In short, our sport sector promotes participation in sport and recreation. We advocate and enact transformation in sport and recreation. We develop talented athletes by providing them with opportunities to excel, and we support high-performance athletes to achieve success in the international sporting arena. In addressing the need for social unification, Sport and Recreation South Africa will continue to utilize sport as a vehicle for social cohesion and nation building. Through our I Choose to Be Active campaign, South Africans can engage in various recreation and sporting activities, such as the Move for Health Day, which is on my birthday, the 10th of May every year, an international event created in 2002 by the World Health Organization with a view to promote physical activity. Move for Health is a strategic fit to the I Choose to Be Active campaign, where sport and recreation encourages South Africans to develop a culture of physical activity for 365 days a year. And here we have a champion in our President Ramaphosa, with his 2 Momina walks. Declared by Cabinet for the first Friday in October each year, the 2018 National Recreation Day will be expanded to incorporate South African tertiary institutions and our communities at large. We want a broader scope of South Africans to embrace and participate in physical activities for fun, leisure, and most importantly, their health. Aligned with World Walking Day of the Association for International Sport for All, commonly known as TAFISA, we will once again host the ever-growing Big Walk in October this year. Provincial departments will conduct similar walks in major cities on the same day. We urge our communities to kickstart their healthy living journey with these events. Our 2018-19 Mass Participation and Sport Development Grant continues to provide the resource towards the Club Development Pilot Program, which we commenced in 2015-16 and is expected to conclude in the book year, financial year 2019-20. Key to the success of the Club Development Program is that national sport federations have to take ownership of community clubs and have them affiliated. Capacity building of club office bearers remain a priority because South Africa's growth and development within the sports sector is dependent upon strong and capable administrators who can establish and sustain the respective sport clubs. As part of celebrating our heritage, the National Indigenous Games Festival will be in September this year. 9 indigenous games commonly played in South Africa will be showcased. The games bring people from culturally diverse backgrounds together as part of South Africa's heritage celebrations. Now, the Golden Games will be hosted in October in partnership with the Department of Social Development. The Games will remain an active recreation festival for older persons, while it's continuing to support the notion that people can significantly improve the quality of their later years by being active. At the youth camps, which are attended by participants from various backgrounds, young people are taught leadership and life skills, the importance of national pride and patriotism, using practical lessons on social cohesion in a rural and outdoor environment. The department will assist the provincial departments to ensure that the delivery of 2018 youth camps in October this year is successful. International relations are becoming more and more important. Worldwide sports strategies are focusing more on increasing the levels of participation in sport and recreation, as well as achieving success in sport. This is reflected in our vision of an active and a winning nation. within the region, South Africa will continue to participate and play an active role in the activities of the African Union Sports Council Region 5. We continue to participate in various committees of the region, that of Sport for Development, Women in Sport, Persons with Disability, the Marketing Finance Committee, as well as the Executive Committee meetings. The Department will continue to build and strengthen international bilateral relations with a view to support sport and recreation development in South Africa. We will do that by executing exchange programs with international partners like Jamaica, India, and Russia. The department is presently finalizing agreements with Cuba, China, Palestine, and Bulgaria. The department will further continue to fulfill our responsibilities in international fora such as UNESCO and the United Nations Sport for Development and Peace International Working Group and the World Anti-Doping Association. Now, following, Mr. Chairperson, problems experienced regarding the office accommodation and the work of the International Working Group on Sport for Development and Peace, there were very fruitful engagements on this matter, and we are awaiting positive feedback on the way forward. MINEP 6 was an important event for the sports sector globally. It provided us with the opportunity to interrogate afresh how governments can embrace the potential of sport and physical education. Through this process, governments could answer the call of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals that have identified the promotion of peaceful and inclusive societies as among the most urgent yet challenging issues across the 2030 agenda. Under the leadership of South Africa, MINEP 6 marked a shift from declarations of policy intent towards measurable actions. In fact, governments worldwide are experiencing the positive impact of sport in the different spheres of society. On the 26th of April this year, South Africa was unanimously elected as chairperson of CGIPS for a second term. As chairperson, we must continue to play a leading role in the monitoring and implementation of the Kazan Action Plan. CGIPS, during its recent ordinary session, also resolved to establish a working group on the revision of the statutes of CGIPS, which will shape the future configuration of the organization. At the adoption of the Kazan Action Plan, chairperson, it was declared that, and I want to quote, active schools in which physical activity is placed at the heart of the school support the establishment of healthy lifestyles, behavior, and learning. In addition, quality physical education is a necessary component of primary and secondary education. This talks to our call for a standalone subject of physical education. My colleague from Basic Education is here, Minister, and it's correct to place on record our appreciation that people with us there from the department supporting us in Kazan when we negotiated this action plan. Thank you for that, colleague. While we understand, Chairperson, the challenges that our counterparts in basic education have, which include, amongst others, the implications of curriculum changes, staffing, as well as resource allocation for physical education, we cannot tire to make this call. Equally, we need to engage the Department of Higher Education with regard to the training of teachers. As a sector, the universities play a critical role in this matter, particularly when it comes to the development of a curriculum that is relevant to physical education. We continue, Chairperson, to enforce and monitor transformation within our various sporting codes and bodies. We recently published and released the 2016-17 Eminent Persons Group's Transformation Sports Status Report in relation to 19 identified sporting codes. I will not attempt to summarize the very detailed findings in the said report. Suffice to say that the performance within and across the codes is uneven. However, a positive aspect of the latest findings has been the increased buy-in of national federations to the EPG processes, resulting in improved data collection, which is inextricably linked to good governance. Through a partnership with the Sports Trust and ministerial outreach programs, we continue to address the challenges of the lack of sport equipment, sport infrastructure development, and active participation in sport and recreation. We will continue to build on this. In fact, yesterday we had a very successful outreach and handing over facilities at Swellendam. Furthermore, in terms of the municipal infrastructure grant, we have identified the 27 poverty nodes, and this coming financial year we will use the ring-fence 273 million rand to roll out facilities in 30 identified municipalities. We do this in partnership because we believe as a ruling party that by working together, we do more. Chairperson, the district academies are an integral part of sport development and is directly linked to community sport and the school sport program. The district sports academies play a key role in talent identification, selection, and development. They facilitate access to sport facilities and to specific scientific and medical support. During the 18-19, the department will, in consultation with our municipalities and the sports sector, works towards ensuring that the district academies are optimally resourced and functional. The department aims to expand the reach of the district academies to where they currently do not exist. The National Sport Academy is at the core of high-performance sport and are responsible for athlete and team preparation. In consultation with SASCOC, the department oversees the establishment of one of the components of the National Academy system, that of the National Training and Olympic Preparatory Center in Bloemfontein. The Andrew Mhlangeni Golf Development Day expose amateur golfers to professional tournament and give them the opportunity to play alongside professional golfers. A portion of the funds raised from the Andrew Mhlangeni Golf Development Day is channeled to the Andrew Mhlangeni Golf chapter of the Development Board of Golf in South Africa. This chapter is based in Soweto and will provide approximately 50 young and aspiring golfers the opportunity to receive professional coaching and assistance with equipment and attire. We are also hopeful that a David Stacks committee will respond to our positive submission relating to Section 18A of the Income Tax Act. In Part 2 of the 9th schedule, sport is excluded. We know that the sport and recreation portfolios are acknowledged as underfunded and recipients of the smallest share of the annual division of revenue. Minister, we believe that incentivizing sponsorship for the projects in these sectors will assist immensely in sport, realizing the nation-building and social cohesion objectives assigned to us in a national department. But the Minister, Mr. Chairperson, Honourable Mslongu referred to two things. And I want to say to the good colleague, if you have nothing to say, please don't say it here. You first of all referred to motorsport. Now, it's an acknowledged federation, my friend, and we fund them annually. Annually, we do that. You also referred to the ministerial committee that was established to investigate the alleged board-related governance issues of SASCOC and the non-adherence of the constitution of SASCOC that impact negatively on sport and on SASCOC in general. The public hearings commenced on the 12th of February this year. The inquiry report is being compiled as we speak, and it will in due course be submitted to our Minister of Sport, and when she will consider that and make a pronunciation on that. In conclusion, Chairperson, I want to emphasize that the potential of sport, its global reach, its universal language, its impact on communities in general, and young people in particular, is a fact which is increasingly being recognized around the world. In South Africa, the time to invest and capitalize in and on this potential of sport is now. If we as leaders in the sports sector do not embrace the potential benefits of sport and recreation, and injustice will be done to all South Africans. We need to believe in the power of sport to deliver in and on peace building, peacekeeping, social cohesion, and nation building. Chairperson, the driving force of our actions should be the passion to maximize the potential of sport. An active and willing nation requires citizens who choose to be active. I choose to be active. What about you? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Honorable Filtane from the UDM.
The founding provisions of our Constitution state, the Republic of South Africa is one sovereign democratic state founded on the following values: human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights and freedoms, non-racialism and non-sexism. Accordingly, discrimination of any kind, including on the grounds of race, is prohibited by the supreme law of the land, our Constitution. Sport performance knows no color. We have throughout the world celebrated athletes in all sporting codes and from all races. South Africa has produced many sportswomen and men of excellent standard, regardless of their racial status. The mandate of the department is to oversee the development and management of sport in South Africa, so government is duty-bound to intervene in the Ashwin case. To this end, Honorable Minister, we urge government to urgently introduce enabling legislation so the minister is not stopped from conducting full-scale inquiries through commissions where necessary. Government has also accepted a 50% color representation in the Springboard team that will be going to Japan next year. Comments and actions by people like Nasty Bota and others are disturbing and only undermine the progress being made in getting racism out of sport. In less than 2 years' time, we shall be sending our rugby team to Japan to compete at the international level. We need to be certain that the team will represent the nation here. That will represent the nation, reflects perfectly the demographics of our country. Persistent tapping in demeaning utterances by person of one race aimed at a person of a different race in a working environment is tantamount to hate, racism speech, which can lead to constructive removal of the targeted person. Two sins are committed when such utterances are made. One, hate speech, which is criminal. Loss of job, for which the offender may be sued for loss of income, should the targeted person actually get dismissed. So Ashwin has got options here. Refer to the Vicky Mombe case. It will be interesting to see whether SuperSport would want to keep a relationship with people who are actually working against its own values, the values of our constitution, and against its own support base, rugby. We hope not. Our young democracy has to deal with this constantly raging race conundrum in our sport and society in general. Racism hit many South Africans where it hits, not only in our studios, but in our sport, our most beloved sport. In South Africa, sport has arguably been far more important than in other countries because of the power it holds to unite the nation. Rugby in particular had, at one point, become the benchmark for how to unify a country, remember 1995, through something which once divided it. But lately, rugby is a source of increasing divisions which must never be tolerated.
1 minute left.
While quotas can be a short-term superficial solution at domestic level, it is dangerous. It's a dangerous road at national level and does little other than stir animosity. To say that our former player, Ashwin, is a quota player, is an insult to those who, having judged him on his actual performance in 2003, chose him for 3 awards in that year. Until our government takes accountability for the lack of facilities at grassroots levels, these sorts of debates are only going to become more volatile, even if they are pivotal in the transformation of South African national rugby team. Hulumende, kutheni nibayekela nje abantu abafuna ukuthabatha inxaxheba kwezemidlalo? Sicela uphendule mphathiswa. Siyaluxhasa olu hlahlo lwabiwo-mali lwakho. Nangani nje i-pittance. Enkosi.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to Honorable Alberts from the FF+.
Thank you, Chairperson, Minister. I will be speaking in Afrikaans and English today. Let me start off by stating that all people, irrespective of race, must have the opportunity to participate in sport on merit. However, about 3 years ago, I was invited to meet the previous minister regarding transformation in sport. We tried to explain in detail how they are about to transform sport into a social domain where minority participation will eventually be eliminated. There was absolutely no talk of development or helping people in poor areas, but only focusing on race. I realized then that the only difference between this system and the pre-1994 system is that during apartheid, sport was immediately segregated, which was wrong, while the ANC methods are insidious in that it pushes minorities out of sport over time. So in other words, we have reverse apartheid. Artikel 9.1 van die grondwet stel dit dat almal gelyk is voor die reg. Artikel 9.2 maak voorsiening vir die regstelling van ongelykhede in ons samelewing. Daar is niks fout daarmee om ongelykhede aan te spreek nie, maar dan moet dit gedoen word deur middel van die skep van gelyke geleenthede en nie gelykheid van uitkomste nie. Transformation and demographic representativity are terms inserted into the constitutional discourse that actually undermine the true meaning of Section 9.2. And I will explain this with reference to constitutional court judgments. Firstly, transformation requires quotas in a form of demographic representativity. However, the Constitutional Court ruled that race may only be used as one of the factors when it comes to affirmative action appointments. Secondly, the Constitutional Court ruled that quotas are illegal. Should we take cognizance of the fact that many sportsmen and women are employed by sports unions, then any actions by the government to enforce quotas to achieve demographic representativity are patently unconstitutional. Another point is that Section 9(2) of the Constitution is not limited to pre-1994 discrimination, but also deals with current discrimination. This means that any discrimination by government taking place today also stand to be corrected. The implication that a sport team or sports type that has too many black participants will have to be transformed to accommodate minorities as well. Take soccer, for instance. Very few whites, coloreds, or Indians feature in this sport, and thus also deserves measures to correct the wrongs. Having said this, Minister, I think that you can clearly note the absurdities of social engineering whereby outcomes are enforced. Sport, an activity based on merit, should be left to the meritorious. No one should receive a sporting position purely based on the color of their skin. We are doing those people a great disservice, as many are set up to fail. We should rather look to create many opportunities for everyone in South Africa, especially the poor people, where there are no facilities and no coaches. And you are not doing it because it's not happening anywhere. And there are signs that some rugby unions are actually getting this right, despite
1 minute
your
left.
efforts. Today, there are many black rugby players that are outstanding sportsmen who are supported by their fans, including white people. So, development in poor communities are of utmost importance. Just lastly, Minister, ons wil u ook goeie raad gee om nie dadelik gevolgtrekkings te maak oor insidente wat op die oog af soos 'n rasse-insident lyk nie, voordat jy al die feite het nie. This member said that all white people are racist. I'm going to tell you, that is a racist statement and it's hate speech, and this institution and privilege does not protect you against that. Take note of that. So, Minister, I just want to warn you last. I have just a few seconds. Please, when an incident takes place, first see what really happened. If there was a racial incident, yes, you can react, because that is wrong. But if there was no racial incident, like the Ashburn Valencia incident, and it's clear
Are you
there
blind?
was no,
Didn't you see
then
this
you
type
can't-
of racism? You don't have
then
to
you can't make a
investigate
statement on
anything.
it before the time.
Time has expired.
I thank you. Thank you,
Honourable member.
Chairperson.
The next speaker is going to be Honorable B.J. Lomo from the ANC. Order, members. I know that sports is very exciting, but let's limit the excitement.
What's happening?
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister Klasa, Deputy Minister, Member. What's that?
Honorable members, let's keep the excitement to the limit. And I'm sure there's no need for any unnecessary drama. Let's not exaggerate the tension and whatever situation that we may find ourselves in for now. Please proceed, Honorable Blum.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister Klasa, Deputy Ministers, MPs, our Department of Sports and Recreation, members in the gallery, I greet you. This year, 2018, is dedicated to both our former President Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela and Mama Albertina Sisulu on their birthday centenary for the roles that they have played, significant roles that they have played in the struggle for our liberation and for our freedom that we enjoy today. As I debate today on school sport, I am reminded of these two icons of our struggle who loved children. The role played by Mama Albertina Sisulu during the Soweto uprising assisting and helping children who had been injured, and risking her own life for the safety of those involved was remarkable. And how Nelson Mandela started a children's fund to help poor and disadvantaged children, and most importantly, giving them education and bursaries. Furthermore, as President Nelson Mandela spoke on the importance of the language of the sports in schools when he said, and I quote, "Sport speaks to youth in a language they understand," close quote, and went on to say how much important it is to have sports in our schools. Researchers have long established that participation in sports can enhance child's cognition and physical education. And sports in schools is the only means of assuring that all the children will experience physical activities, more especially in sports preparation, development, learning skills in an early stage in childhood, which is why school sports play a bigger role in the education of our children. Not all our children are gifted academically, but most of the children love play, and most of these children are not really academically or low learners. They use their skills of playing in enhancing their education generally. The early learning, the school helps our children in preventing boredom that can lead to substance abuse, alcohol abuse, criminal activity. And lately, there is a lot of obesity now associated with our children, which will lead to diseases like diabetes, cardiovascular diseases in their later lives. In line with the National Development Plan 2013, the new dispensation on school sports began on the 9th of December 2011, when the Department of Basic Education gazetted a draft on school sports policy for public comment. That sought to clarify issues of governance and custodians of the school sports, and the roles in which and responsibilities for all the sports stakeholders. The members of public were encouraged to submit their comments. A task team had to be established, consisting of the basic education, sports and recreation, and all sporting codes in school structures, and some national federation. This was to make sure that the school is developed properly and in line with the policy. The memorandum of understanding, though, had to be drawn between the basic education and the sports and recreation in order to define the roles in which each one had to happen. The sports and recreation South Africa had to be responsible for these school sports codes and provide an oversight as custodians of all the codes, support the school structures to plan, manage, monitor, and coordinate sports in the structures, and also support the sports financially. Department of Basic Education, the role is to establish school sports structures from local to national, support school sports codes and structures, and deliver and the delivery of school leagues programs through school tournaments, and also identify talented children through their tournaments and inter-school sports. Due to the legacy of apartheid, though, pre-1994, our schools faced a number of challenges, such as lack of school infrastructures in all our rural areas and urban township schools. And remember, our rural areas are the vast areas. Only a few schools in the urban areas.
2 minutes left.
To continue. However, with the limited budget that our sports and recreation is given, they have gone a long way in making sure that the school sports are assisted. 50% of our little budget is allocated into sports and is shared amongst all 9 provinces, with a further 20% on school sports. The infrastructure, the municipal infrastructure grant provided is sometimes not enough to be, is not used for sports in most of the municipalities, is used for other things. Some improvements though have been done in that regard, and some are now required. All new schools now built is a must to have new school sports facilities. The talented schools, therefore, are helped through the ministerial bursary, which helps our schools to further their talents in the school in the sports focus schools. There are 34 focus, accredited sports focus schools where all these talented children are taken to. And there are 60 children so far that are assisted through this fund, which is helping our learners. They are given 100,000 a year, which helps them.
Time is expired, honorable member.
I support the school fund.
Yes. The next speaker is supposed to be the AIC. I don't see them. The next is Ahang, not here. Next is the PAC, not here. So we'll move on to the DA, Honorable D. Bergman.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I can take the time of the other 3 parties too. Bill Shankly says, aim for the stars and you'll reach the ceiling, but aim for the ceiling and you'll stay on the floor. Since coming to Parliament at the beginning of this term, all I ever wanted to deliver was a better deal for our sportsmen and women. A transformation that would correct the injustices of the past, would put South Africa firmly as one of the top sporting nations, and most importantly, would grow a talent pool reflective of our demographics, incorporating all class, race, and gender of people from all 4 corners of our country. My inputs in our portfolio committee and speeches year on year have always been for the upliftment of sports in South Africa, for what sports could do to heal a pained nation. Unfortunately, as I stand here before you nearly 5 years later, I have nothing positive to tell you. SASCOC is going through a management disaster that, quoting a certain popular athlete during the SASCOC Commission, said they seem to have focused more on administration than on the athletes over the last few years. I watched 3 ministers come through with different ideas and different thoughts on how we should be pursuing transformation. The one came with lots of lights and noise, another sang from the same song sheet as us, although he threw Tennis South Africa into an immature, unsporting political spat. And now we have a new minister. The Commonwealth and World Cup rugby bid later, we are hardly off ground zero. We traveled South Africa on oversights. We saw schools that had, and we saw schools that never had. We saw principals and teachers committed to perfecting our homegrown talents, and we saw those that turned their back on sports a long time ago. We saw schools with manicured lawns, and we saw schools with no fields at all. Every step closer to the truth took me many steps away from hope. You see, transformation is not going to be fixed by changing the national sporting teams, but rather by creating an enabling introduction in sports for our future talents. Education, health, social development, and COCTA all have a role to play in spending money on budgets that create fields, provide mass events, and encourage participation. Yet they operate in silos. We are losing coaches, we are losing opportunities, and most of all, fields that are ring-fenced in the MI grants. They are better known as Field of Dreams because that's what they remain, fields of dreams. Dreams that they would one day materialize. You see, whilst the politicians and the administrators have been fighting and dictating what transformation should be, it is the sportsmen and women that have suffered. Those that are now, those that were, and those that will still be. In 2011, SASCOC released their transformation charter for South African sports. In the preamble, it recognized that increased access and opportunities for all South Africans and acknowledged that they had a right to sports and recreation opportunities. This would have been in line with the Glen Eagles Agreement of 1977. The Charter went on to identify people in our society into three groups: those that live in the past, those that are uncertain and apprehensive, and those willing to accept anything to see progress. What has seemed to lack and what we have all seemed to miss is the voice and accommodation of fans and players that might have experience and opinion that brings about transformation and success without any division. The Charter states it is strategically suicidal for transformation to be viewed solely from a restrictive political rather than a holistic perspective. This statement in itself is political, and with the introduction of the groups and driving factors makes the basis of this Charter in itself political. The essence of transformation strategy has four key areas: 1, demographics; 2, access and resources; 3, development; and 4, community participation. The code seems to be full of prescription to unions and sporting codes, but almost gives a free pass to government. In these 4 key areas, it is clear that transformation is just as much a government issue as it is a sporting code issue. The one cannot win without the other. However, the one who holds the purse and the whip in this equation tends to be the one pointing the fingers at everyone else but themselves, and seems to be the one that the DA is trying to hold to account. We should be ensuring transformation on a school, community, and club level, and thereby growing the talent pool and ensuring that if we got the basics right, the rest would follow. However, we use methodical methods such as scorecards and quotas to a mechanical problem. It is important to note that the Charter identifies the primary obstacles to transformation being resistance, funding, infrastructure, poor governance, poor talent scouting, poor community structures, poor implementation, and a lack of unified sporting plans, collaboration between government departments and spheres. Yet time and time again we focus on the output with scant regard to the input, and the constant warning and recommendations to please focus on the foundation 4 years later shows us that we still sit on a bus that quite frankly has gone nowhere. Our biggest legacy that this committee could land was to create an enabling and sustainable environment in transformation. In a DA-run country, sportsmen and women would participate equally with access to resources, whether in a private or public school. Schools, clubs, and provincial matches would attract fans, sponsors, and talent through a homegrown pool of talent and all-encompassing.
Who's going to be your presidential candidate, Nick Mallet or Nas Botha?
Order, Honourable
Give
Member.
back the laptop.
Honourable
I
Member,
dedicate this speech-
Honourable Bergman, Honourable Member, you cannot just jump up and start using the mic if you are not recognized. This is not a TV studio. Continue, Honourable Bergman.
Thank you, and give back the laptop. I dedicate this speech and my efforts in sports to our heroes and ambassadors of the talent that this country produces. May they get the recognition that they deserve. Sports can create hope where once there was only despair. It is more powerful than governments in breaking down racial barriers, quoted by none other than our late President Nelson Mandela. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Ralagoma.
Honorable Minister, Thokozile Xasa, Honorable Deputy Minister, Gertus Eisen, Honorable Chairperson, my colleagues in the committee, ministers and deputy ministers present. I think I should also acknowledge the MECs present. to just respond on some of the issues that have been raised by our colleagues, starting with Honorable Paulsen. He has left already. Oh, I thought we are together in terms of who our enemy is. So I'm surprised that all of a sudden your enemy are whites, and you want us to make whites our enemies. It can't be right, because the ANC is responsible for building a new nation that will be made by all the people of South Africa. Honorable Mhlongo, we don't understand how can you stay in Soweto, Orlando, next to a beautiful stadium, and you don't see that as delivered. Instead, you come here and play to the gallery. The DA will never acknowledge good work done by the ANC because they are desperate to be in power. Even in Johannesburg, you did not win the elections there. You were assisted by the EFF. And I must tell you that ordinary people in Soweto are complaining because there are serious reverses that are being done by the ANC, by the DA and EFF government. I do not understand how can we talk about transformation and say we must forget about the apartheid legacy. That is what we are saying. We are saying we should forget about what apartheid has done to ordinary people. You are saying, the DA, in fact, the DA represents white racists who are refusing to change. They are represented by the DA. Budget will always be a challenge. Even in your own house, you cannot do all the things that you want to do. Fellow South Africans, in tribute to the life of Isitwala Ndwe, Nelson Mandela, who placed value in sport as seen in the assertion that, open quote, sport has the power to change the world, it has the power to inspire, it has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language they understand. Sport can create hope where once there was only despair. It is more powerful than government in breaking down racial barriers, close quote. Due to the significance of sport and recreation, the African National Congress rises in support of Vote 40, Sport and Recreation South Africa. This is the department that has achieved clean audit consecutively for 4 years. Its entities being boxing South Africa has moved from unqualified to qualified audit finding, signaling improvement in management since the appointment of CEO and the CFO. While South African Institute of Drug-Free Sport should have received a clean audit by now, but a minor finance accounting which has now been sorted out by the appointment of the person responsible for finances. We as the committee are paying attention to issues raised by the Auditor General. One of the cruelest legacies of apartheid is its distortion of sports and recreation in our society. The enforced segregation of these activities and the gross neglect in providing facilities for the majority of South African people. So sport and recreation in South Africa should have been understood as abnormal until the long struggles waged against apartheid by the African National Congress which emphasized that participation in sport should reflect the country's demographics. Other liberation organizations and the sport movement itself that led to the unification of racially divided sport associations and the establishment of non-racial federations across major sport codes. We'll always respect Mr. Sam Ramsemi for the good work that he has done in actually leading the sports movement in fighting apartheid, particularly the sport that did not include everybody. ANC Ready to Govern document and the ANC's Reconstruction and Development Program, which highlighted the need to remove obstacles that preclude specific sections of the community from participation, became the reference point of the sport movement. It was the ANC in its wisdom that took a conscious political decision to ensure that sport should be embraced in our country as a vehicle of change. This led the ANC government in 2011 to bring together all sports stakeholders to chart a way forward on challenges confronting sport and recreation, culminating in the National Sport Indaba, where the National Sport and Recreation Plan was adopted, which is in itself a victory in that it brought certainty on how to navigate the many challenges in sport. The NSRP outlines the implementation plan for the sport and recreation policy framework defined in the white paper on sport and recreation. The department, Boxing South Africa, South African Institute for Drug-Free Sport, South African Sports Confederation and Olympic Committee, and all federations funded by the government follow and implement the National Sport and Recreation Plan. As we speak today, we have more than 60 sport federations being supported by South African government. I am of the view that the ANC has made wonders on this field over the years to today, where we have now non-racial federations working together with government to such an extent that we now participate in competitive sport locally and internationally. E.g., we are currently ranked number 2 in ICC tests and number 3 in ICC one-day internationals, while ranked number 6 in rugby. With regard to soccer, we are unfortunately ranked very low at number 72. So competitiveness of our teams should be looked into by the department. In athletics, Team South Africa recently represented us well by winning 37 medals and finished number 6 at the recently concluded Gold Coast 2018 Commonwealth Games. The African National Congress has tasked itself with the responsibility of transforming sport and recreation as part of the overall transformation of South African society. Sport and recreation remains an important vehicle through which we ensure a better life for all our people. The policy of transformation in sport and recreation is an integral part of ANC policy on social transformation. That is why at the core of the National Sport and Recreation Plan is the Transformation Charter and the Scorecard that is monitored and developed by an independent commission called Imminent Persons Group. And that is why I fought, and I'll continue fighting with Honorable Bergman. Because they want to sugarcoat transformation. Even now, their recent conference, in fact, I'm scared that we are going to go back to zero in terms of their recent conference. It has even ensured that people that were scared to come forward, they are now coming forward to the fore to even oppose Africans within the DA.
Honourable Member, your time is expired.
We should be worried about DA because, in fact, it's going to reverse all the gains that we have made.
Honourable Member,
thank you very
your
much.
time is
we
expired.
Support the budget.
The next speaker, order, honorable members, order. The next speaker is the Honorable Minister of Sport and Recreation that will close the debate. Order, honorable members.
Thank you very much, Chair. I take this opportunity to also recognize my colleagues who have joined us and the MECs that are also here, and appreciate the flow of the debate and appreciate the support that our budget vote is receiving from the honorable members. And under your leadership, Chair, we remain resolute that at no stage will we apologize about transformation. It is a must. It is what we have to carry doing. And the members of the Democratic Alliance must not think that they are representing even other white South Africans. We have a lot of white South Africans who have heeded to the mandate to give and open opportunities for our young people, to take infrastructure to where they are, and they are working with us. I think somewhere in the gallery, we have one of those South Africans who is a recipient of the Ministerial Award for recognition, who is one of the top women golfers of South Africa, Sally Little. I hope she's there. She is assisting young girls in neighboring schools to play golf. So don't think that if we are talking about transformation, we are isolating the athletes who are making us proud as a country. Those are our athletes. They are not your athletes. We continue to support them and we take them wherever so that they can compete, and critical to it, you can see the bond that they develop amongst themselves with our young people. And if we had not enforced transformation as it gradually develops from the quota system that we are to force transformation as a start, we would not be having today young people like your Simbanis, your Casters today, your Luvos. We would not be getting those young people who are breaking world records. That is why even the world, just like those who are like representing solidarity from the side of the DA, want to reverse such transformation. We will refuse to adhere to that. And Honorable Mhlongo, we have not made any error on withdrawing our inquiry. I haven't had any of your legal background. But we have instead strengthened our own hands to proceed with the inquiry, and we have given it much more strength in having it as a judicial inquiry than an ordinary inquiry. And for the Freedom Front Plus, Mr. Alberts, maybe you have not read the latest statistics in terms of demographic in South Africa. Look at it up to 2030. If we can remain with the current situation in terms of the demographics, some of the codes will just dwindle. They will not be there because of the nature of the population growth. It is realistic, but at the same time, it is not an apology to open opportunities for our young people to participate. With the Commonwealth Games, we had 89% white participants, and some of them would have been athletes. The oldest of them is 67 years in a code that does not exist in our rural areas and would never exist in our rural area. That is why we have said to federations, Be realistic, go into the provinces. We've talked to MECs in the MINMAC to say, go to the province, identify top priority spots so that we all prioritize and go. They will go with the federations. And within the federations are people who also want to connect with the rural areas. They want to connect with our townships. They want to connect with our schools because they have not had infrastructure. That is why even when we were discussing at MINMAC level, we have agreed to prioritize and refocus our attention to look into the allocations in terms of the Division of Revenue Act so that we can get in and provide these kinds of infrastructures that would allow games to be played in our areas, but on those codes that are predominantly played within those areas. We are not just looking at transformation from the angle only of the playing field where you count the numbers of heads, people who would have been identified. We are even reviewing the case for sport in South Africa so that to open opportunities in structures, in the business of sport itself, so that even these uniforms and kits and everything that we supply, we are able to open opportunities for our former players and current players who want to start to also do business because they had an opportunity to start having money. So we will be proceeding with that, and we're excited. Standard Bank has come to the fore to train current players and previous ones on business skills. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable members, you are reminded that the House plenary to debate Parliament's budget vote will take place at 2 p.m. in the National Assembly chamber. And that concludes the debate and the business of this mini-plenary. And the mini-plenary will now rise.